When did you start to, I guess, when did that difference, if you will, start to percolate a little bit more within you? Does that make sense?
Yeah, like my queerness, right? Is that
yeah, like when did you kind of start to realize that?
Oh, it was probably Mr. Sugg, our PE teacher in elementary school. No, I did recognize from a super young age that, that I was queer in the classic sense of the word. That there was something that set me apart from particularly the other boys. I was never interested in the things that most of the boys wanted to do. I remember Car and Driver magazine was just a huge thing in elementary school and middle school. And I don't know why that was such a huge thing at my school. I went to a Christian school, but our library had Car and Driver magazines everywhere. And that was what on lunchtimes, anyway, the boys would get all the Car and Driver magazines and talk about cars. And I would just be like, isn't there anyone here who wants to talk about, literally anything else? Amy Grant. Right. Can we talk about Amy Grant's newest album? Like,
right.
So I think.
Did you find yourself hanging with the girls then a little bit more, or?
Yes, for sure. My best friend from age 5 or 3, even, I think, was when she came to our church. But like from age 3 until we went to the same college together, so a couple years into college, was a girl. And we, I found like total refuge in that friendship. And it was great because she played piano and I started writing song lyrics. So we became a little, we had our little music thing happening. And so we got to do that a lot in church, perform our own songs. And we were constantly at each other's homes. And yeah, it was great. It was great to have a friend that I didn't have to put on a whole lot of airs with. I mean, I never came out to her of what was going on in me, but for sure, for years, I had a close friend there, and that was great.
Nice.
Yeah.
I lost you there for a second.
Sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. It's just the connections. We'll work with it. And so your queerness started coming out in was it in high school, you said, or?
I would say earlier than that.
Earlier.
And it was not so much associated with my sexual identity early on. It was just more the queerness of being different, and things that I, can now pull back and identify as being part of a whole package of queerness. But for sure, by the time, adolescence hit and attractions started happening, that was when I knew for sure that, back then I would have said, I struggle with same-sex attraction, or I struggle with homosexuality. I have a thorn in the flesh, just like the Apostle Paul did. So yeah.
Did your spirituality or your connection with your religion, did that start to, I guess, separate? When did that start to separate for you? Was it related to your sexuality, or was it prior to that it kind of started unraveling, I guess?
I did everything I could to maintain my spirituality and particularly my religious faith. Not even my spirituality, but the religious faith of the culture that I grew up in was of utmost importance to me in all ways. So I worked really, really hard to always put that first. And anytime I came up against a conflict with anything that was going on internally, I would choose the church, I would choose the Bible, I would choose my faith. I never, it was a long time before I ever let myself even start to question my faith. So I wouldn't even say that they came up, that there was any kind of recognized struggle internally with me until college, really. What I had done up till that point was just kind of have the person that everybody knew,
Mm-hmm.
Matthew, who was the good golden kid, and sang in church and was on student government and led chapels at our Christian school and just did all the good boy things that he should be doing. And then I had this very internal, private side where I would indulge my I would indulge my sexuality in private, whether that was
Mm-hmm.
looking up some porn or whatever. But I would
Right.
always, the guilt around having that secret second life was so intense and so overwhelming. And I remember writing so many songs about repentance and the need to get right with God again because I screwed up yet again. And so I was just in this cycle of what I perceived to be sin at the time, and then needing to be redeemed, always back and forth. And it's a little exhausting to go through that day.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think a lot of us can relate to that experience. So when you went to college, were you studying, what were you studying?
Everything. I changed my major so many times. I mean, I went to a little Presbyterian school in Tennessee, and so still in the same kind of fundamentalist Southern Bible Belt vein, but even at a little small Presbyterian school, you're going to have a much more diverse experience than you are when you're just in your family's cultural bubble and literally don't know anyone who doesn't believe almost exactly the same way you do. So it was interesting to be in school and where I worked with the ESL department for a little while, just meeting people from around the world who did not line up with American evangelicalism at all in any way, and then just meeting people from other faith traditions, other Christian traditions, and some students who, God forbid, at our Christian school, weren't even all that Christian. They landed there for all kinds of different reasons. And so that was the first time I ever had my eyes opened to the fact that not everyone around me who doesn't believe the same things is a terrible pagan, as I had been taught to believe, or a terrible heathen. That was the whole reason my podcast is called Heathen, is because that was just the word my mom used growing up all the time. Anything that felt outside of our religious cultural experience, oh, that's heathen. Those heathens,
Right.
I had to reclaim that word a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And so you brought up I know the Heathen podcast comes a little bit further down the road.
Yeah, much later.
Yeah. So I guess so after college, what'd you do?
So college, I moved back home for a little bit, and then I moved out west. I had an opportunity to go to Reno, Nevada, and I had grown up reading all the Western stories, the whole go west, young man. That was it was a whole thing. I was very excited to go try out a different part of the country. So the biggest little city in the world, Reno, Nevada. I lived there for a couple years. I got involved in a church there, a big mega church. I was eventually brought on to staff. I was a worship leader. And then from that experience, I became part of a church planting team from that church that moved down here to San Diego, where I am today. And so that's why I'm in San Diego, was to plant a church, which I did with a group of people, and we did that for. I'm sorry.
Well, and your sexuality was still something that you weren't necessarily living into at that point, or?